Hello, welcome to our webinar on KPIs as more than just numbers. What I would like to do is describe a bit about how we can tell stories with KPIs and not just focus on the data side of things or the quantitative side of things. Before we get there, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Eric Peterson. I'm the Innovation Manager at Corporator, where I've been there for 12 years. We're a software company that develops and sells and implements a business management platform. And I guess you could say I'm half nerd, half business, but I will try to keep this webinar all business so that it makes sense to people. But that's my focus, understanding the business needs, meeting those needs using technology and kind of bridging the difference, if you will. I've worked with all sorts of companies throughout the world, so my topics today will be taken from a wide range of influences that I've experienced from working in the field, and my focus will be more on the practical side of things rather than the theoretical, because we all have to live and work in the real world here. So this will be much more than just a thought exercise. Okay, so let's get started. I'll try to keep this brief. We'll try to make this about a 20-minute webinar so we have some time for questions and answers at the end. And what I'll try to do is show a mix of some conceptual slides to illustrate some points, and then we'll just kind of go through a brief solution demo at the end. Because again, I do like the technology side of things as well. That might be a bit ambitious, but we'll try to keep it on schedule. And again, my main focus is how can we tell business stories through KPIs so that KPIs are more than just numbers. But I believe before we get there, we should maybe discuss why we use KPIs in the first place. And then from there, we'll move into how we can use KPIs to deliver business impact. And I guess you could say, we have several terms for describing this concept of business impact. But in essence, it's about focusing on what the KPIs are intended to actually deliver. So you can call them outcomes or impact, but the point is we want KPIs that do something. They facilitate some sort of change in the organization. They're not just mere measurements. And since KPIs that deliver impact are more than just numbers, we also need to discuss a bit about what that means or what they're composed of. And some best practices, and again, how we can use technology to support that concept. So this is where we'll start. On the technology side, we'll just discuss a bit of the difference between data dashboards and traditional ones. With this business dashboard concept that I'd like to introduce, which coincidentally, Corporator, the company that I work for, develops and sells. All right. To begin with, let's start with 8 reasons for using KPIs. Of course, there could be more than 8 reasons. If you have some extra reasons, feel free to send them to me. But I think this is a good starting point, and this is what I came up with. Okay, first reason is just humans require some sort of management. We need a control system. Another is that we need to ensure that things are moving in the right direction. And I'll go over these in more detail in a minute. We also, sometimes we just need to drive change in the organization or create competition. Other times we might set things up where we build these out into value drivers, where we understand KPIs as they're related to other metrics or other KPIs. Other reasons, external reporting, so it might be for governance purposes, it might be for the investment community, it might be for customers. Back to internal reasons, maybe it's for decision support. I think that's a fairly common one. And also sometimes it's used, or a set of KPIs are used as a basis for a reward system. So I think this is kind of a good starting point. Because I think one of the key elements for telling a story with the KPI is making sure that the purpose or the reason is clearly understood by the people that are using them. I mean, we don't measure performance just to measure. It's not like we don't have other things to do in our busy work lives. So we measure for a reason, and it's important to understand what these reasons are. So that they're anchored in something deeper. So it's something more meaningful than just capturing a number on a regular basis. Okay, let's start with the first one. This is the control bit, and I'm sure most of you have heard this management theory before. You know, the X and the Y management style. I don't personally believe this is a black and white dichotomy. I think some businesses might lean more towards one style or the other. But I think realistically, most organizations are kind of a combination of the two, or that there's a continuum where some employees kind of need the X style, some need the Y style, or they thrive better in those kind of environments. So I don't necessarily think there's some universal human truth to either X or Y. And again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this concept. It's kind of like a 101 level college course in management or industrial sociology. But the real point is there are organizations that need to deal with this type X people. The people who generally need to be monitored or controlled. They require human management. They really don't thrive in the X or in the Y side of things. They thrive in the X style. So they need this. It's not a pejorative thing. It's not judgmental. I mean, some people, we're all different. But KPIs end up being a fair way of handling things. We'll move on to point 2, ensuring that things are moving in the right direction. And there's always I think a Winnie the Pooh quote for everything, but it's like, where are we going? And it's like, I don't know, said Winnie. And so they went there. And I think a lot of times there's a lot of navigation that takes place where people don't really know where they are going. And we can set up a measurement system to ensure that things are moving in the right direction. So, in the old days, of course, before there were compasses or GPSs, sailors used stars to navigate, and that's really what this little comic is illustrating here. And of course, you have the North Star. And I grew up about as far away from an ocean as you can get on this planet, and even I was taught how to find the North Star. And I think it's a good metaphor to think of the North Star because, there are countless stars that are visible to the eye, but I don't know of any other star that is as easily identifiable and that will help you find north. And I think that's the point: is to find a reference for your company to ensure that things are going in the right direction. And then, like any sort of navigation, you have to monitor things along the way, make sure you haven't drifted off course, and make the small corrections along the way as necessary. Example number 3, driving change through creating a burning platform. I don't know if you're familiar with the burning platform concept, but the concept is like this, and it's a bit of a gruesome example, a real tragedy. But the concept is that people are capable of doing amazing things if they have the right kind of motivation, like a burning platform. In this example, there was a platform on the North Sea that was burning, literally as you see here, and people were jumping about 100 feet down to the water. Now, it's not something people normally do. They don't train for it. They could easily be killed just from the fall. So it's a high-risk sort of thing. But when the platform is on fire, there's no hesitation. So how does this apply in our example? Well, it works sort of like this. Let's say you want to create a burning platform. But on the other hand, we need to show outwardly to our customers, to partners, to other stakeholders how great we are. Maybe prestige is part of the corporate brand, and you don't really want to show a burning platform to investors or customers because you are going to scare them off. So you can still paint a nice external image, but at the same time, internally, you can create a different picture, an internal picture to drive change. Because if your external picture is too nice, are your employees really motivated to make change? For example, if your main value proposition is like quality, excellence, we are the best quality in what we do. How can you sell quality if you're struggling with quality internally? And how can you get people to improve quality internally if you paint this external picture that you are the best quality in the world? So there's a bit of a conflict with those two messages. And one of the ways of resolving this conflict is to kind of split this picture, like we saw a moment ago. Have one image be your internal focus, creating that internal burning platform, that kind of motivation to get people to change in a way that doesn't conflict with your external image, where you need to be an excellent company, excellent partner, and so on. Moving on to number 4. Creating competition. Now, this is can be a bit of a sensitive topic. I work in Europe where there's a lot of transparency, but I realize that transparency can be an issue in certain types of organizations, especially when you get into individual performance or team performance or that sort of thing. So I realize it's a bit sensitive, but I think competition can really bring out additional effort under the right conditions. I want to explain a little bit about what that might look like. So if you consider this example, you've got these, a group, you've got these 4 employees, and each one maybe has their own scorecard or their own KPI, and each only knows how he or she is doing. They have no idea how the others are doing, but they understand the history, their own performance, that sort of thing. And you have Bob there. He's at 92%. He's green. He's happy enough with that. Tom's happy at 96. He's green. You've got Jeff there. He's doing fine. You got Don. He's really lagging behind at 72%. But that's business as usual for Don. So he assumes, since it's business for usual for him, he assumes everybody else is probably in the 70s or 80s. Because there's not much transparency. But now we can see a different picture. Now we are having full transparency, like a scorecard. It might be like a hall of fame or a wall of shame. I don't know. Maybe an employee of the month or an employee of the quarter, some sort of recognition or something like that. And suddenly Bob and Tom, because there's some transparency, they see that 100% is entirely achievable. It's not just some stretch target, some lofty target that's nobody will ever hit. I mean, they see that Jeff's hitting this thing, so it's doable. So they can be a bit more motivated. And suddenly, maybe they want to knock Jeff off his perch on the leaderboard, or maybe they want to get Employee of the Month. And then you have Don, who's he's way behind, and now he knows it. He knows he's not, he's way behind the others. It's not just everybody's in the same boat. He's really needs to do something. So he's motivated to get out of the basement here, get out of last place. And so what you have here is something where even your higher achievers who are in the green, they're motivated to do any better, even better than they have been. And you have Don, who's even more motivated to get out of the basement. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, monitoring value drivers. I assume most of you have heard of value drivers. You've heard of this concept. Usually what this is about is mapping some sort of relationship among metrics, usually in some tree view. So you don't have this kind of spaghetti maze like you see in this little illustration here. So as an example here, we'll just use some example that I think is fairly easy to understand. If you consider something like a low-cost airline, maybe their big objective is to achieve fast ground turnaround time. They look at it like the planes aren't making any money on the ground, so we got to keep things moving. And then what they can do is they can start to break that down. So the on-ground time is composed of arrival, departure, and bunkering, when they're refueling, rewatering, resupplying the plane, that sort of thing. And you can break those down even further, like from the time you open the door till the time that it takes off again. And so you have this kind of you kind of have this view. So the story becomes much more interesting. We talk about storytelling. We have the whole sequence. We have the whole story right here in front of us, from start to finish. And this lets us begin to isolate and pinpoint pieces of the processes that we should look at improving. So, in this example, you can see that, there's no point in even touching the bunkering. That's not really where the problem is. And we can even take this like a step further. Like if we want to run this through an analytics tool, we can break this down into even more granularity, where we might look at the plane type. Like we've got Airbuses, all these different plane types. We have Boeings. We can see which ones maybe are more efficient. We can look at which crews, which days of the week, which regions, which airports. I mean, you can break this down to any number of dimensions and start looking for correlations. I mean, maybe you find in some airports or some regions, because of the way the logistics are designed or whatever, it creates certain problems. And you don't want to be working on solutions that aren't even workable in those regions if it's a systemic sort of thing. So I think you get the idea that this gives you much more information, breaks things down in an easily organizable way, and it really starts to tell a full story. Okay, external reporting. Again, we touched on this in the intro about this, but it's about people want to invest in strong companies or be customers of strong companies. So this could be like affecting the market. Like things like stock and that sort of thing. It could be for marketing purposes. It's about metrics that might be held up externally outside the company, and they're really used to show how attractive the company is. So that's really the point. I mean, we want to show off a little bit for one reason or another. Number 7, decision support. I don't know if this little comic is fully appropriate, because that's a gigantic bottle of medicine. I think in reality, most people have much smaller medicine bottles, but I think that's the whole point. We have limited resources, and we need to prioritize. So that's really the question: is having a decision support measurement system that lets you know where to spend your time, resources, money, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I'm starting to see now is, I guess you can call it a benefit realization model. I think a lot of people attempt to do this in one way or another. This kind of organizes it in a bit more of a framework. But what it is it's about a certain, like a feedback loop that helps you determine what you get out of your investments within your own company. For example, if you forecast or if you project that spending maybe $200,000 on an improvement initiative will result in $1 million in quality savings, you'd probably go for that idea. But that's just a forecast. In a way, it's a guess, and the cost savings, it might be very different in the end. But by putting this into some sort of system with the benefits realization model, you can prove during or after the fact whether or not your investment is delivering the results that you expect. So this helps you adjust and tune things on the fly. You can add more resources if you need to. Like let's say maybe the project is overachieving. Maybe you hope to get $1 million in quality savings. You're looking to get $2 million. That's fantastic. Maybe you can either reduce the money you're putting into it, or maybe if you amplify it, maybe if you double it, you'll get double the return back. I mean, you don't know. But the other thing is, maybe you're investing a whole bunch of resources into something that's delivering no results, and you might want to reprioritize. You could use them better in somewhere else because you actually have some evidence-based decisions to do that. So that's really what we're about here. All right, and then the last one, looks like I numbered this wrong. I should say number 8, but it's a basis for reward and compensation. It's like bonus models. It's pay for performance. It's not for everyone. It's probably not for every company, probably not for every employee, but some customers are into this. Usually sales staff get some sort of pay for performance sort of thing. But if you need this sort of approach, KPIs can provide a nice way to kind of balance out the purely quantitative data. So you can maybe mix a couple of metrics together, so it's not just about like how much you're selling. It could be like mixing in customer satisfaction or those sorts of things. Okay, these are the 8 reasons, and they can be used in various combinations. Maybe some of your KPIs serve more than one purpose, for instance. But regardless, I think the point is that the reasons you're using these KPIs should be very clear to your end users. So if you have KPIs that are designed to make you an attractive investment. That should be part of your strategy. It should be very clear. We want to be seen as a attractive investment, and this is what we're doing around that. And then you start building a story around it. You start creating a purpose and so on. If you're about creating internal competition, the rules should be very clearly understood. Nobody likes a competition if they don't understand the rules behind it, or if they feel like the rules are applied unfairly or arbitrarily or that sort of thing. So it should be very, very clear, and then you can also kind of build that into a broader initiative to create a culture of performance, that it's about everybody doing better, not just trying to get everybody up to a certain level, but even if you're an overachiever, we want you to overachieve even more. Likewise, if you're driving change through a burning platform, you should have that part of a broader context, like continuous improvement, that no matter what, in our mind, we will never be good enough. We will never stop improving. We're just always going to do that. And I think that creates the right kind of psychology. We will always aim to improve things no matter how excellent we are. Or likewise, if you're trying to move in the right direction, it should be very clearly communicated. You should create a roadmap. You should create the pathway, the plans for helping you reach that destination. I think that's really key, so that people aren't just moving and moving and moving without any context of where they are, what direction they're going, how far they've come, and so on. All right. So how do we build a story? I think the numeric aspect of KPIs is pretty widely documented and covered. So let's for a minute, let's assume you have the right KPIs with the right targets. How do you begin to tell a story? The first part, and this probably sounds a bit obvious, but it's just plain narration, like you tell any story. It's describing what is going on. It's describing the performance that occurred, giving the reasons, and this can be through comments, written assessments, and so on. It's basically the words that take the numbers and make them mean something. And I see this for customers, like with comments, that this is often as important or more important than the numbers themselves. I mean, they have very elaborate ways of escalating comments from the top up so that they can get the information they need to make good decisions. But I also think it's really important psychologically for employees that they feel that they can give some feedback or mitigating statements, or I don't know, maybe it's just excuses, whatever you want to call it, for when they miss targets or objectives or those sorts of things. So I think it's really important that there's a bit of feedback in the system, when it's not just a top-down sort of thing. Another thing is this corrective actions. Again, it's like, what do you do if you don't meet a target? I mean, if you want to put a system into action, make it actionable, do you have a remedial system in place? And this is more for like what I would consider a short-term gap in performance, like something you would do on a regular basis. I would see that as being a bit different than having initiatives to improve performance, because these are more long-term plans to fix things or to improve things and so on, usually involve a lot more resources and so on. But I think both of these are very psychological, that it's not just about saying, you need to meet this number or else. It's more like, if you're not meeting this number, that we look at this as an indication that something needs to be done to help you, and this is how we're going to help you, either through creating some sort of corrective actions, or by adding some initiatives of giving you some of that medicine that we saw in a bottle to make things better. Another thing I think that I see a lot of people do is try to model some sort of governance rules into their system. So again, it's in a way it's related to the corrective actions and initiatives, but I think this has a little bit more to do with some of the workflow that goes on behind the scenes about what happens, whether there's notifications, escalations, who's approved, basically the rules of the game. It's more, I would say this is more for the internal purpose, and the corrective actions and initiatives are more to actually serve the problem where it's experienced out in the organization. Okay, and then we have things like risk factors, risk mitigation plans, and so on. But that's really about looking at what might stand in the way of our ability to meet targets and goals. Like, are we addressing these issues? So you can have the risk reduction plans, and so on. But it really covers the workflow related to risk. And then we have the linkage to the overall business context. This is really the why, the purpose. Why are we doing this? It anchors the KPIs in the business. So maybe they're strategic. So let's link them to the strategy, or maybe it's tactical. It's related to some sort of functional area. It, in a way, it doesn't really matter as long as we understand what that purpose is. Is it clear what that KPI represents? Because a KPI in a way, it's kind of a proxy for something else. It's kind of a substitute measurement, and we need to very clearly understand what the purpose is. So again, all in all, I believe, in terms of best practices, it's best not to just have a passive reporting system of KPIs, because it can create a culture of just kind of learned helplessness, where KPIs are just imposed upon your workforce, and there's no clear plan for how employees will meet or beat the challenges of meeting targets and objectives and bridging those kind of performance gaps. If you're going to measure people, you also have to give people the ability to meet those targets. And this is what we're really talking about in terms of delivering impact. So it's not just insight. It's not just about identifying what the problem area is. It's about building a path, building a story, giving employees the resources, the time, the attention that they need, so that they can feel like they're winning and succeeding, and they're satisfied in their job, and they're meeting their expectations and understand the expectations, all of those sorts of things. It's a lot of psychology involved at that end of it, but it also really builds the story, and it engages people. Okay, so what does a solution actually look like? Now we're moving on a little bit. I'm just going to, we've talked a bit about some of the conceptual stuff. It's like, what does this look like in action? This is not the solution that I work with, but I just wanted an example of a typical solution. And this could be a KPI in a spreadsheet. It could be a KPI in a data dashboard, because you see a lot of this kind of KPI concept. It's actually called KPIs. Even in Excel, they call it a KPI. Microsoft Power BI, they call it a KPI. It's kind of everywhere in a way. But what do you get? Usually you get something like this. It's just a row in a table. It might be linked to a business unit. It might be linked to a time period, like you see that the time period column there. But it's a simple calculation. It's generally just a measurement. You don't have the things we were just discussing about with commentary and ability to execute and all that sort of thing. So in this example, it's like the row in a table, and you see the same sort of thing in a traditional dashboard. Which, again, they're great at visualizing data. They allow for data exploration and providing data insights and so on. But we want to get from insight into impact. We want to affect change through KPIs. We want performance improvement, and most significantly, we want to achieve some sort of business outcomes or business results out of this. So coming back to this, in this world, we're talking about something that's filter based. So you don't really have a navigation for time. It's just a filter or a business unit. So what is your context? What's your reporting period? What's your business unit? Your model? What function? What business function is it linked to? What's its purpose? You really don't have any of that. You just have this kind of visualization. And you're basically building out pages, but you're not really building a business model. And this is what I would say is a bit of a better approach. This is a business management platform where rather than having that kind of data dashboard with filters, we have a bit of a different approach. Here, we have the objective, and this is navigation. You can have a whole bunch of information on an objective page. Here we have the classification. This belongs to a stakeholders category. It could be in a scorecard terminology, it might be a perspective, but it's a way to organize metrics or business models. You have this kind of breadcrumb across the top for navigation, and it's very, very clear what the reporting period is, what the business unit is, and so on. Who's responsible? It's very clear. The data source is right there. The history, again, if you're trying to build up, KPIs and analytics tools, unless you're building a special page, maybe you can build like a sparkline chart or something to kind of show trend. But every time you build a table, it's modeling data again. And then I think this is one of the key pieces. Commentary. Here's some comments. It explains why the performance is the way it was, and the manager's assessment of the performance. And then taking it even further, what are the initiatives that we're using to improve performance? Here they're organized on a little tab. You can see that highlighted in red across the top. And then you can have these longer-term initiatives kind of broken down with Gantt charts, and they can have their own progress and status and that sort of thing. And again, if you want to link it even further, take it further, we can talk about, what are the risks that are impacting this objective. And inside those risks, you can have little tables like you see here about what kind of activities are we doing to reduce those risks or mitigate them in some sort of way. Okay, so what does this look like? Now we're taking a look at a demo in Corporator Business Management Platform. We've arrived at a landing page, and you can see on the page we clearly have a reporting period, December 2018. We can change this to different period types, different months, different years, etc. We have our navigation across the top, and we can go into more details. This is for navigational purpose. If we click into one of these, we'll see more details. So we have a bit of a dashboard on operational performance with charts and graphs, that sort of thing. If we go into one of these even further, we can start to get into more details. So here we have that kind of value driver tree that we saw earlier, where we're looking at maybe the cost breakdown on operations, and we can click even in further to see where the details come from. So we can either see this kind of description view. Again, we have the source and who's responsible. The commentary is all very, very clear. And we can keep these kind of concise, like dashboard type views, but we can also back them up with additional data. So if you want to see more like a tabular breakdown of the value driver tree, or if you want to see additional details, we can have it broken down like this. I'll try to run through this very quickly because we're running out of time. But this is another type of dashboard view, and I think this is helpful for telling a story. Again, we have a visual dashboard in this type of view, but we can also go back into this kind of table view of metrics where we have things organized. We have a bunch of KPIs organized under objectives, and they're put into different categories. We can also link in the different improvement initiatives. Again, with commentary, a breakdown of all the initiatives. Each one of these can also have its own page where there's all the additional details, the different activities, actions, and so on. And we can even attach risks into our projects, especially projects that have a lot of resources. What are the sorts of things that might impact our ability to meet time or budget or those sorts of things. We can also have these kind of high-level risk dashboards. So this might be more like organizational risk instead of project risk. And we can even link things directly into something like a management meeting. So you've got the agenda, you've got the different initiatives that you're maintaining focus on, who's attended, attachments, maybe the new minutes, the new initiatives, whatever tasks and follow up. But the point is that you can reuse all of the content that you've already created directly in the meeting to keep things streamlined and organized. All right, and then just as a final example, here we're taking a look at another type of dashboard. If we click into the operational focus, what we can do here is also take a look at some sort of embedded analytics. Like if you have a third-party analytics tool like Power BI or Click, or there's any number of these tools, you can do the analytics directly in our solution as well. And we can pass the different parameters in for period and time and so on. And also, we can take these types of visualizations, which might not be so well suited for adding commentary or improvements initiatives, but we can add that context next to it. So as you see here, we're adding the insight and learnings from the chart, and we're adding some improvement initiatives. And I think it would be quite challenging to try to do that inside a data analytics environment. Anyway, that is a very, very quick rundown. I mean, if you want more information or a closer look at our solution, I suggest you give me or somebody from our team a call or an email. All right, I think that about wraps it up. I'll leave this here. If you do have any questions, if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, you have my email address. Of course, you're free to send me any questions or comments through the webinar interface, and I'll respond to those. I hope that you're still with us and you found this useful and enjoyable. And I'll be giving a few more webinars in the coming months. But I just want to thank everybody sincerely. Thank you for attending, and I hope I see you at the next webinar. Thank you.